Thank you for listening and supporting the Daily Memphian. Sign up for one of our many free newsletters and breaking news alerts at dailymemphian.com/email to receive the latest local news stories impacting our community. Our weekly newsletters cover everything from sports to arts and culture, business, food, and more, along with daily updates of all the news we publish each day. Sign up or manage your email preferences at dailymemphian.com/email.
What's up, y'all? You're listening to the latest episode of the Tigers Podcast. I'm Frank Bonner, joined by co-host Steven Johnson as always. We've got a little bit of breaking news to talk about with the men's basketball game against Cincinnati being postponed because of weather, plus the Emoni Bates news that happened the other day, and it's National Signing Day for the football team. But before we get into all of that, I got to make sure y'all check out some of our other podcasts, starting with Jennifer Biggs, who hosts the Sound Bites, Eric Barnes hosts the Sidebar, and you already know our guys, Chris Harrington and Drew Hill have got you covered with the Grizzlies podcast every week. You can find all of these anywhere you get your podcasts, including Apple Music, Spotify, and dailymemphian.com. Now, Steven, before we talk about Emoni Bates, I want to talk about the Cincinnati game being postponed. I know Cincinnati has a lot of weather coming through, but at what point did you realize that this game may not happen on Thursday?
It's 11:36 right now, so I got a text message about 9:45 or so, kind of outlined that, basically asking me if I was in Cincinnati at the time. Thankfully, I wasn't. I'm still here in the city, obviously, with you. But we just found out just an hour or two before the official announcement. I had saw that the weather was coming, and that I think it's anywhere from 3 to 9 inches potentially. So I was wondering how that would impact the game. Because of that, I was going to travel in a day earlier. But now the game's been postponed. It's a quad 1 level game as of right now. We'll see where it stands in 2 weeks. And now it's kind of setting up to where since the Tigers will have to play at Houston, at Cincinnati, and at SMU in 1 week. That's a grueling road trip, but at the same time, as of today, that's also 3 opportunities for 3 straight quad 1 wins. So it's setting up right now for that week to the month of February is ultimately going to decide how we view this Memphis season. I think, whether they make that last run for the NCAA tournament or just kind of get back in the AAC race. So now this week in particular, it just becomes monumental because you're facing 3 of the top 4 teams in the AAC. And the 3 teams where if you beat them, you probably get back on the bubble. So, it's going to be challenging to try to win all 3 of those games. But because of weather now, Memphis has that week is even more grueling now than it originally was.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the nature of the weather we're living in right now. Now, as far as looking ahead to UCF, what do you expect out of that game, particularly as it pertains to whether or not having Emoni Bates and all of that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess just touching on the Emoni situation right now, late last night, because there's always something just before I was really just about to shut it down, put my phone down and just, get on Netflix. A report from a reporter, I believe his name is Jake Fisher, said that Emoni Bates wouldn't play tomorrow against Cincinnati and that his status with the program is in question. Now, Emoni's father, Elgin Bates, who coached him in high school and on AAU circuit, basically reached out to a bunch of media members and said Emoni is just going to see a back specialist, that he's been having some pain in his back for about 3 weeks. And I've noticed he's taken a couple hard falls. I think he took a hard fall, against East Carolina. And there was another game where it seemed like he took a hard fall on his back and he was down for a minute, maybe the last game against East Carolina. So I think there might be something to there, but I also had a source that's connected to the program reach out to me and also say that they would not be surprised if Emoni Bates has played his last game in a Tigers uniform. Now, whether that's because they're just going to shut him down because of his back injury or whether because the initial report was actually correct, I'm not sure. And it's also worth mentioning that Penny Hardaway talked to us all yesterday on Tuesday about injuries. He didn't provide any update on Emoni. He didn't say he would be out or he was dealing with anything. In fact, he had a kind of positive update in terms of bringing some of the other guys back. So I think it's either way. Now there's just another storyline to watch for the Tigers. There's always something. So his status, it seems like he wasn't going to be able to play tomorrow. and his status going forward may also be in question. But going to UCF, I think that it's another revenge game. That game, when they played at Orlando, it seemed like the Tigers were just gassed. UCF outplayed them for sure, but that seemed like a game where I think the amount of the limit on the bodies is just kind of caught up to them at that point. So it'll be an interesting game. It's a game that, of course, they can win. They can win the rest of these games going forward. But now that you don't have that Cincinnati game, I guess it's opened up the door to have more of those guys like Jalen Duren, DeAndre Williams, and Landers Nolley, giving them more time to get back healthy, which they need for when they face them on Saturday.
Now, what do you think this does in terms of roster lineup? If Emoni Bates is out against UCF, and if he ends up being out for the rest of the season or whatever the case may be, what does that do to the rotation?
Assuming, because Penny said he's hopeful to get those three guys I just mentioned back. Jaden Hardaway is a guy that looks like he's going to be out for a little bit while longer. So let's say they get those guys back, and it's Emoni and Jalen out. I don't know how much it really just changes much of the lineup. Penny has kind of shown lately that, especially late in games, Emoni hasn't been on the floor lately. And another thing that made me give pause to that initial, I guess, Imani's dad response. I know last game against ECU, Emoni was visibly frustrated on the bench because he was out of the game for a long time late in the second half. So rotation-wise, I think it's going to be some combination of Jalen, DeAndre, Lester. I would love to see if they could start Josh Minot at the 3, honestly, and whoever they want to start at the point guard, Alo, Earl, or Tyler, will be fine. But I don't know. It doesn't change much as long as they get those other guys back, because it seems that Hardaway, whether it be against Alabama, ECU, had kind of decided that late in those late game situations he was going to lean on other players outside of Emoni. So I don't think it would change much in the rotation, but it obviously wouldn't be the greatest look if he does indeed kind of depart from the program.
Now, you mentioned the rough week that they're going to have, moving that Cincinnati game to the 15th. That week seems like a tournament or bust week for them. I mean, if they don't make it out of that week on a high note, then they're probably out without winning the tournament, you say, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, as of right now, all three of those teams are top 75 in NCAA net rankings, and they're on the road. So those are 3 quad one games, and you're not after that. The only other opportunity you have is going to be when you host Houston in the season finale, which, just beating Houston once and going 0-3 in that stretch, I don't think it's going to have the impact it could have. So now you go into a situation where, let's say you go 3-0. One of those teams, like a Cincinnati, may drop out, but either way, you'll still pick up 2 quad one wins and another quad 2 win. And now your resume, it's not the greatest resume in the world, but I'll put it to you like this. Joe Lunardi has SMU as a bubble team right now. I think either next 4 or first 4 out. Memphis, assuming they will go undefeated in that stretch, will have win over Alabama, win over Houston. I think Virginia Tech still a quad 1 level win, and another quad 1 win from that group. So that would, I think, if SMU was on the bubble, if Memphis was to go undefeated, I think Memphis would also jump into them and maybe get back in that last 4 in, first 4 out type of range, which is all you can really ask for going into the conference tournament. So it's massive. I don't see how anything less than 2-1. If they don't go at least 2-1, then I think it's officially conference tournament or bust time. But it's a massive week, and they have an opportunity to make up a lot of ground in both the AAC and the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, that was gonna be my next point. Let's say they split Houston, right? So let's say they go 2-1, lose to Houston, and then beat Houston in the regular season finale. Does that still put them on that bubble team, type of trajectory?
I think so. Like I said, obviously, if you handle your business and you split, let's say you go 2-1, you beat Houston on the road or whatever, you lose to Houston, you beat them at home. You still in the month of February and March with 3 quad 1/quad 2 wins. I think beating Houston twice will really put you in a strong position to where you might go in as one of those last teams in. But if they can split that, then I think they'll be on the bubble. And then maybe when you go in the conference tournament, maybe you don't actually have to go all the way and win. Maybe you just win 2 games. That'll be just enough to sneak in because they got to put 68 teams in or whatever the number is. So I think Memphis has work to do. But like I said, it's just a massive opportunity to make up a lot of ground, and they can't squander it. I think it's a little unfortunate that they got to put the game in between Houston and SMU because there's just going to be a lot of pressure on them. But hey, this is the hand they've been dealt. So now they have more time to get a little bit healthy. So now I guess the focus turns to UCF. And if you lose that game, then, that'll be a tough start to the month of February. They had to go through these next month and those 2 games in March. I really don't think they can afford to drop more than 2 games, probably no more than 1. And that 1 has to be to Houston, honestly.
And I know, last week when we talked, we were previewing the East Carolina game, and we were wondering if it was going to be a double digit or was it going to be another close one. They ended up winning 71-54. Not just the win, but in the way they were able to win. Do you think that does something for them momentum-wise, that they didn't have to, grind this one out towards the end, or does it not really matter?
Man, honestly, every time Memphis gives you these glimpses where it's easy to kind of see, like, I think this could be the turning point. I think they're about to turn the corner. But they've kind of burned me and the fan base a couple of times. So, honestly, it was encouraging, especially for a guy like Lester Quinones, who started the way he started, but then still finished at one of his best games of the season. I think he started 1 of 6 and ended up making the final 4 of his final 5 shots. So, I think that was very encouraging. The fact that they kind of were able to put a team away as opposed to letting the team hang around. I think there is some positives they can take from that. But at the same time, East Carolina's not a good team. So, there's only so much. I was really interested to see how they performed today on the road against a pretty good team that gave them all they wanted to at home. So Thursday's game would have told me a lot about what to expect. So now I'm kind of still in that wait and see approach. You got UCF at home. It sounds like you'll have some guys back, maybe a couple or maybe even all 3 of those guys back, depending on who you talk to. So now I just think, and Penny said the focus is to take it 1 game at a time. They're just focused on going 1-0. So they go 1-0 on Saturday against UCF. You come back and you beat Tulane at home. Then that's 4 wins in a row. And then it's time to start thinking, are they about to go on a run like they did last year?
Well, it's crunch time for men's basketball if they want to find themselves on the inside of that tournament bracket. Moving over to football, for a lot of teams, National Signing Day is pretty quiet. I mean, the real signing day is the early period. It's 11:47 a.m. right now. They've signed the quarterback J.C. French, and they've signed Heidi Barlow, another JUCO transfer. I'm anticipating that Joseph Norwood's signature will come at some point today, but not a major splash for the signings today. They had such a big splash during the early signing period. The big takeaway from this class as a whole is just the number of junior college transfers coming into this class. I think is a big mark for them in terms of how are they going to pan out. Mm-hmm. I know some of the junior college transfers coming in for last season didn't necessarily pan out as much as they anticipated. We'll see what this one does, especially with, losing some of those fifth-year seniors from this season. And then you've got, the running back Ducker coming in, who was the MAC Freshman of the Year, to kind of help, jumpstart their running game. But you still got Brandon Thomas there. So we'll see what's going on with that. So a lot of interesting position battles that could be going on this offseason.
Who is out of the class? I know we talked a lot about Tevin Carter. I guess who was the guy or who, or are there any prospects you think could also kind of compete for maybe some early playing time?
That aren't JUCO or just
really just in general JUCO. Well, let's stick to the freshmen for now. Are there any freshmen that you think could really kind of come in and maybe contend for some type of significant role, whether it's kind of like as a reserve or special teams or anything?
Well, I mean, everybody's high on Joshua White, right? So you gotta, you would anticipate that he'd get in there, at least have a shot to get in there to show if he can have any quality playing time. So I do think you'll see him on the field, and if he produces, then you'll see him throughout the season. But you have 4 games to play before redshirt, so I think you're going to see him in at least 4 games. Mm-hmm. And then if he produces, then we'll see him.
One guy that really kind of caught my attention when I was still on the beat right before switching over to basketball was Sutton Smith, running back / wide receiver from from Georgia. He was a guy that was kind of blown up in the summer with more Power 5 offers, but he stuck with Memphis. And we know how Memphis wasn't as explosive last year. They really didn't have that, that Kenny Gainwell, some of those other guys, those weapons that we had kind of gotten accustomed to. Just from what you've seen, could he be a guy that could kind of fill their role in the future as their receiver/runner that Memphis kind of become known for?
Yeah, kind of like, how they try to use Rodgers.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that if he played this year, I think it'd be more in that hybrid receiver role just because that running back room is so stacked. I don't know if he'll get any, major carries with that running back room, but I can see them using him as that hybrid receiver. Especially when talking to the new offensive coordinator, he did say that one of the things he likes about running backs is if a running back is good enough, you line him out to receiver, or vice versa, you put a receiver and running back. So it sounds like Tim Cramsey is used to having that type of hybrid system between those two skills positions. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him, kind of play both positions coming from what Cramsey said.
Now that Cramsey's on staff, is there a player that you think could really kind of thrive in this? I know it seems like the system is somewhat similar to what they were running under Kevin Johns, but is there a player just off the top of your head that you think could maybe break out under a new OC?
I think Asa Martin. Just because what we were able to see out of him at the end of last season in terms of being in the passing game, it sounds like Tim Cramsey is going to use his running backs in the passing game. So you've got to anticipate that Asa Martin will be involved in that, especially because, like I said, that running back room is so stacked. You want to find different ways to get some of your skill players in that running back room on the field, and using Asa Martin as a receiver could give him a lot more playing time. And so I think I'm anticipating that he will have a lot more receptions than he did previously.
Yeah, that's interesting because Asa closed the 2020 season strong with also some of his ability as a receiver. I was kind of obviously Brandon Thomas emerged and was looking like one of the best young running backs, at least in the conference. So that'll be interesting to see. That's an interesting name to choose. Just overall with Cramsey, I guess I think you had a chance to speak with him now and things like that. What's your kind of just maybe? What was the biggest thing that he kind of just impressed you with in some of your initial conversations with him?
Well, I think one of the things that he impressed me with is he seems real comfortable. I don't know if comfortable is the right word, but he's not in a flux about the QB situation in terms of picking, a quarterback. He seems real sure of himself on how he wants to go about handling that situation, which I think is a big plus for a new offensive coordinator who feels like he's comfortable in helping make that decision. And then the other takeaway was, which I think is good for Memphis. I know a lot of people didn't like the way the offense looked this last season, but you don't need, and he kind of said this himself, you don't need to blow up the system. His system is really similar to what Memphis was trying to do. I think Cramsey will keep the same philosophy. The biggest difference is, can they get the run game going? Because if they were committed to trying to make the run game work last season, but after those first 3 or 4 games, it didn't work, and that kind of tampered off the offense. If Cramsey can do enough schemes to where the run game is productive, then I think you'll see a Memphis offense that you're used to seeing without having to change a bunch of schemes. And I think that will be beneficial for the players who don't have to learn a lot of different packages, because he's going to pretty much keep it as simple as it was.
All right, and I guess kind of lastly, last year we got excited not only because of the recruiting class, but also some of the guys Ryan signed through the transfer portal. It didn't seem like a bunch of those guys panned out, at least in their first year. Obviously, we kind of talked about it a little bit, but now, according to 247 Sports, they have 6 transfers committed, 3 coming from the Power 5. We've kind of talked about Ducker from Northern Illinois a bit. How important is it going to be for some of those other guys to kind of, I guess, pan out and kind of be instant impact guys going forward for Memphis, since we know they're replacing a couple of significant guys on both sides of the ball?
Well, I think one name you got to look at is Anthony Lamphere. A JUCO tight end, and obviously, there's Memphis' second best pass catcher was tight end Sean Dykes, who was now gone, and so you kind of want to be able to plug in that role. I'm not necessarily saying that Anthony needs to come in and put up Sean Dykes' numbers, but the tight end position under Sean Dykes has been, a very important piece to their passing game. And so you want to see Anthony Lanphier kind of come in, at least fill some of the void. And so I am anticipating to see him get a lot of playing time, and hopefully he produces the way that, Memphis expects him to do. But that's one name that I do anticipate following closely.
Well, the Tigers, Ryan Silverfield is about to put a bow on what seems to be another talented recruiting class. Memphis basketball is doing Memphis basketball things. Game was postponed, but they'll have another opportunity to get back to it on Saturday against UCF. Check in with us next week for all the latest developments.
In-depth journalism in the Memphis community. The Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.